This is the Tabernacle podcast with John Vermilia and me, Britton Bishop. What's up, John?
I need some context.
Okay.
You sent me a video on my phone, and it took me a minute to understand what I was looking at. If it was like a 4-4-2, 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, 3-4-3 soccer formation, I would know what's going on. But I'm looking at a zoom in of a football scrimmage line.
Yes.
And then I notice there's one dude whose backside resembles you. But everyone else is in uniform. You're not in uniform. And then I watched you kill a kid. I need some context. What were you doing with these children, and why did you kill that kid?
First of all, he wasn't a kid. He's 18 years old. But no, we Manistee high school football. I coach offensive line there.
And you're the offensive coordinator.
Something like that. And we don't have very many kids. I don't know. It's just that kind of time of year. Kids don't get playing time, start to fade out, and kids don't stick around. But we're playing playoff game this week.
You mean you have kids who quit?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
They're not playing or getting the ball. Whatever. It is what it is. We're better because of the kids that stick it out.
Oh, they cut themselves. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So, but we're playing Gladstone last week. Hopefully we won, but it's the district final game. And they got a decent offensive line, so I was like, I'll jump in and play right tackle, give our kids a look. Kid I was going against, pretty good athlete, good kid, but he needed some. He needed a good look.
I saw is because it's from above. I don't know if it's a drone or what.
Yeah, it's just like a big stick with a camera on top of it.
Yeah, and so the ball is snapped.
Yep.
And then I see Britton Bishop with one left arm swat the kid. Looked like he killed him.
Yeah, he's 6'3", 290 for context, so he's my size. He's my size. He's not.
Yeah, but he doesn't have that. I played college football strength. I almost had old man strength, but you ain't old.
No, it was a. There's moments where you can make the game much simpler, and you learn it over time. Right? I'm sure there's things in soccer that it's like when you're young, you try too hard almost.
Yeah.
And that was one of those. I did that, and he's like looks up at me with these big eyes, and I just said, "You're playing checkers. I'm playing chess."
Nice.
And so it was just he's a good football player. I know how to expose people's
dude,
technique.
So your right tackle and your left hand just swatted him. I just swatted the mic. It just swatted him, and then he was like stunned and going away. And I'm like, that's a big bear.
Big Tom knew what it was. Yeah. It's just a technique thing. I learned it in college, and it made football much easier.
It made me giggle.
Yeah.
It was late at night, and I'm like, look at Britton beating up on children.
It was one of those moments, too.
18-year-olds,
where
whatever.
You coach high school football or you coach a sport, and the kids know deep down, like, oh, Coach Bishop played in high school, and he played in college, and he was probably good based off what he looks like, but we don't know. And there are those moments where you're holding the bag, and they block you, and they do a good job. And then I think in their head, they're like, oh, I could take Coach Bishop.
I could take him.
And then it's that moment, and now all the other 30-some kids on the team know, like, it's the, like, Captain Phillips moment. Look at me.
Yeah, look at me.
I'm the captain now.
I'm the captain now. But it looked like you were dressed just like you are now.
Yeah, I was in.
Like, you just had a jacket.
Well, that was the
open.
I showed it to Hope, and she goes, are you wearing a helmet? I said, no. She goes, well, how's your shoulder feel? I said, well, I only use my left arm. And she was like, you're an idiot.
And she's right, because
yes.
I had one of those moments. It's legendary, at least in my mind. The boys are trying bicycle kicks at the end of practice. And I'm like, move. You don't know what you're doing. They're like, can you do a coach any better? And dude, I executed a bicycle kick. It was amazing while I was in the air and while the ball was going in the back of the net. And I hear all the, ooh, ah, what? When I hit the ground, I heard all the ribs break. I cut practice right then. I was like, all right, boys, time to go home. And they're like, what? I go, yep, we've had enough for today. Let's go. I couldn't breathe. You know, the only guy that knew was my captain. He goes, Coach, you okay? I said, not even close. He goes, did you hurt your ribs? I go, broke them all. Broke them all.
Yeah, mine, I'm good. The only thing that was hurting is my fingers because
you swatted him.
Well, and I kept playing from that point. And any good offensive lineman, if you're listening to this, your kid plays offensive line. Here's the thing. Holding shouldn't be a penalty because it happens every single play. It's just a matter of whether you get caught or not.
Said that. Yeah.
And so I held all these kids and like, you're holding. And I was like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. But without gloves, my hands weren't in shape. My middle finger's a little crooked right now. But
paying for it.
It is what
just
it is.
A little bit.
I loved it.
I was impressed. I might save that on my phone for future reference.
That's one of those, yeah.
Good job, man.
Yeah, how you doing?
Doing well.
Good.
Doing well. And you had said something about the football where you were talking about when you've been doing it for a while, there's just, you learn some things.
Yep.
And so we're in Questions Men Ask, part 3.
3. Yeah,
Part
we've had
3.
one question women's ask.
And it isn't that we're the experts. It's just for some of these people, we've been doing this longer, or we've been answering these questions longer. Because sometimes people ask me a question, I'm like, great question. That never bothered me before. Let me go look it up.
That's such an interesting concept too, because it's like, I'm going to ask this question, and in that process, you don't know the answer, and you go and find that answer, and you learn from answering their question.
Exactly.
And I wonder how many people that have these questions that hold them back from moving forward, or they become a hindrance to their walk with Christ, or whatever it might be. And the question back to them would be, well, have you looked for the answer yourself? Or is that, you know what I'm saying? Like, and obviously there are questions I ask you, Adam, and I ask you a ton of questions because there's wisdom in that. But there are times as well where it's like, we find them the same place you can. Yeah. And so, but I'm excited about this segment. What's one, I was curious of this. I didn't preface you ahead of time, but I think it's good for people to hear this stuff. What's one thing over the past 3, 4, 5, 6 months maybe that God's been teaching you? Like some of that wisdom stuff that it's like, man, like this has been a good, fruitful, like this is what I've been learning over the past. That
there is fruit in, as you would say, giving him your yes over time.
Yeah.
It isn't just in those moments. I still can't believe that, like, I think it's in the last 2 years, Michigan's become the place I've lived the longest in my life.
Dang.
And specifically in Buckley, at the Tabernacle, now in Buckley and Manistee, God willing, in a third location soon. Yeah. But seeing the fruit of a long obedience in the same direction, not just one yes, but a successive yeses, and not always perfect.
Yeah.
My wife and kids can attest that it's not anywhere near perfect.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's been teaching me just keep at it.
Yeah.
You know, as a wise man who may or may not be the producer of this podcast said, just keep going.
Yeah,
just keep doing it.
That's good. That's definitely because I'm no longer a statistic. At the beginning of this semester, I made it past the statistic mark as a student pastor at this church. And but
I didn't bring it to your attention because I was like, don't jinx it. Commentators curse if I jinx it. Yeah, sorry.
But it was, I think, the thing that I'm learning, and one at the Basics Conference when Tony Merida talked about saying making 30-year commitments in your pastorate.
Ooh.
And I think that is one thing that's been just like, I don't know, it opens your eyes to consistency, contentment in where God has you, because I think often whenever we start to think God's calling us to do something else, or how much of this is God's calling, how much of this is my own desire. But what you just said reminds me of the Alistair Begg quote that he said to Martin and I when we got to just catch him in a stairwell for a moment, and he said, don't overestimate what you can get done in a year and underestimate what you can get done in 5. And I think that what we're getting to see, especially at the Manistee campus, student ministry specific, is like we're finding now over a long right? Like yesterday was the first day that it was really like, oh, this is what we prayed for when I first moved here. Nice. I just walked into the school yesterday. I go in the door, I walk past the secretary, she opens everything, and I was just eating lunch at the school. And it's not anything about me, but it was just like, man, I remember when I moved here and there were so many people like, you'll never get into that school. And I was like, yeah, but we did. And it's not anything other than the fact of just consistent, sooner or later they'll have to let us in. Like, I'm just going to keep showing up. Like, and so I think
you're
that
coach, you're going to be with students, you're there in
things.
Crises, you're there when they need you, and it's building relationships.
But it's those multiple long yeses, because like coaching for me is a hard yes. It seems like it should be an easy yes. But when you really start doing the math, like we're talking 75, 80-hour work weeks. As much as people don't think coaching and being at a sport is work, like, I mean, my iPad was just open to film. Like, that's a lot of work. And it's not like I'm getting rich, right?
Nope.
Especially as a volunteer.
Exactly.
But it's a hard yes sometimes in the convenience piece. But now I'm getting to see that. So I would echo that long obedience in the same direction. And
kind of reminds me of the Pastor Ben Brown, our executive pastor at the Tabernacle. He encouraged the pastoral team, and he may have also mentioned it to the entire staff, but I think it was specifically the pastoral team. He read us a quote from a book from Eugene Peterson, where he said similar to what Begg said to you, and was it Adam or Rizzy that was in the story? Yeah. He said, if a pastor like a captain on a ship will lash himself to the mast
Yeah.
and to stop looking over and, what about that church? What about that place? But I think it's true for just Christians.
Yeah.
This ship that God's in control of, just lash yourself to the mast of faithfulness.
That's good.
And over time, he'll get you to the shore he wants you to be on. So,
yeah, Rizzy was with me. I was trying to teach him how to skip stuff. Because I'll sit in every session, take notes at everything, and do all the stuff. And I was like, hey, Martin,
we're going to skip something.
Let's skip something. And then, lo and
Surprised
behold,
Tim didn't teach you guys
we
that
meet
stuff.
Alistair Begg skipping a session, right? So I was like, we
You
did
get
it,
to
Rizzy.
see the man.
So, no,
That's
it was
awesome.
cool. Yeah, so we're jumping back into part 3 of questions men ask. And I've learned a lot, so I want to say thank you to you and Tim, especially you guys have. I almost feel like I shouldn't even, like, this is like, where's Tim? Tim should be doing this one with you.
Nah.
But I've learned a ton from you guys and gleaned a lot of wisdom. So I'm excited to be a part of this one. And so we're just going to jump in to questions men ask part 3. The first question we have here is, how can I explain God to someone who doesn't believe? How can I explain God to someone who doesn't believe?
Yeah, that's like trying to describe the greatest thing you've ever seen or experienced, and it's kind of like you had to be there.
Right.
But I would start exactly there. Start with your experience of God.
Yep. Yeah.
Just what Christ has done in your life, what He's meant for you. God has a way of drawing people to Himself, and it's quite possible that your experience is exactly what they need to hear.
Yep.
Plus, your experience is undeniable.
Yes.
Now, granted, they can come back and say, well, my experience says the opposite. Well, then you're just kind of at that place, well, you ask me.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you how I would start.
Yeah.
Kind of there. What about you?
Yeah, I would echo that. Like 1 Peter 3 says, always be prepared to give an answer for the hope that is in you or the hope that you have. And so I think, obviously, like telling them, well, why do you believe in God? I think that is key, because sometimes we can information overload people, and that's not always what they need. There's a time and a place for information, but I think for somebody that doesn't believe in God, for them to know that there's a personal conviction first. Like for me, the resounding evidence of Christ and his bodily resurrection and all of that stuff is incredible as you study it. But for me, the one that sticks the most is the men and women that were willing to die for it. Right? I don't know them, but I know that there are people in history that gave their life for this cause. And I've been the kid that lied about how I wrecked my truck and different stuff like that, but I wasn't willing to die for it.
Right.
And so when I think about the evidence of Christ and why I believe, those are the testimonies for me when I hear about the ones that were willing to take it to the end. And so I think personally, and I think in the aspect of trying to share your faith or begin to introduce somebody that doesn't believe in Christ to Christ, it starts with, well, why do you believe it? Because I think that piece is very important. And I think, too, sometimes people I know some people that are awesome, they're intelligent, but everybody doesn't need to know how smart you are.
Right.
And I think sometimes that can be a turnoff because it can feel like, well, I'm not going to get there.
Yeah.
But I think
that's really good.
The thing I always tell students in any workshop I teach for sharing your faith is, how was your life before Christ? How did you meet Him? What has changed? And then at the end of that conversation, always, always, always ask, is that something that maybe you want to do?
Right.
It's simple. And
Yeah.
so
there's another thing as we become more adept at talking with people that don't believe in God about why we do believe in God and why we believe in His Son, Jesus Christ, and His Spirit that lives in us. Beyond your own experience, in your conversation, in the relationship you have with someone, sometimes it's helpful to discern or ask God, even while you're talking with them, God, help me figure out what their point of need is.
Yep.
Jesus always met people at their point of need.
Yeah, that's good.
The woman at the well coming there for water, He started with water. Paul in the book of Acts, when he comes to Athens and he sees all the idols to all of their gods, and then he sees one idol, and the inscription says, to the unknown God. They realize we've got all these gods, but the reason they had all these different gods is because those gods weren't fulfilling. So they said, well, maybe there's another one out there. And he met them at their point of need. He said, men of Athens, I can see by your idols that you're very spiritual, and I noticed you have this one idol to an unknown God. I'm here to tell you about Him.
Yeah.
And His Son, Jesus. So it's sometimes you need to discern where their point of need is, because it becomes a great entry point.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you hit that one. Good. The next question on this page is, how do you teach people the Word? How do you teach people the Word? Question number 2 that we have today.
Well, we agreed that we were trying to kind of nail a lot of these today.
Yeah.
That's a workshop.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
a seminary
Exactly.
degree. That's that could take a long time. Now,
Mm.
there's two ways to do that. How does anyone teach somebody the word, or how do I personally or you personally
Right.
teach someone the word? And so I think both of them come back to time in the word.
Yeah.
You can't teach people something you don't know.
Yep.
And so, or as I've heard many men say, are you reading the word, or are you letting the word read you?
Yeah.
And in that process of reading God's word, letting it read you, you become more familiar with it. And those are the parts that become the most memorable.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that ask that question. They just want to conquer the Bible.
Right.
They just want to have all the knowledge that Britton Bishop has right now.
Yeah.
They don't know that in the last 6 years, you've been playing catch up at a crazy pace. Like I would guess, in fact, I know because as part of our staff, there's different times we'll assign some reading, and it's not always the Bible, and it frustrates you because I would guess that Britton has spent more time reading the Bible even than sports articles. And you know a crap ton about sports.
Yeah.
You know about the no-hitter
Right.
that was chucked in the World Series this past week.
The greatest part was the home runs that popped up on the Richter scale at Penn State University.
Nice.
I don't know how pitching coaches and pick up on. So anyway.
Yeah. But so how do you teach someone the word? It's time.
Yeah.
It's reading the word. It's listening to people talk about the word. And at our church, I was just talking to someone, actually an awesome young couple that are kind of new to faith, and they were like, "Yeah, we're just we're going to the Bible overview, and the person who was teaching it said, well, you guys all know that story, and we don't know that story, and we come in here and we can barely keep up. And how do we learn the Bible?"
Yeah.
And I was like, keep coming to church.
Come to our young adults ministry in January.
Come to the young adult ministry, join a fight club, join a women's Bible study, and it's what we said at the beginning. Keep after it.
Yeah.
It's going to come. One interesting thing that this couple said is they are so committed to wanting to learn God's word, and they realize that this book is so daunting. I forgot to tell you this. They're actually reading children's Bibles together.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because they're just like, man, we just got to get the basics. So then it makes sense when we do the lot of words. Let's do the little words, And I was like, man, you guys are doing the right thing. Keep after it.
I remember there was a moment, because I mean, you hit on it, and it's nothing to me. I've been playing catch up, and I'm trying my best to be prepared to give an answer for the hope that is in me. And I think that a lot of that comes from studying Scripture. So I've read through the Bible quite a few times in the past 6 years, but I try it's not always just my CSB study Bible, just smoking through it. But one of the most weird experiences in my life, to me at the time it wasn't weird, but then I think back of what were people thinking of me. I was in a coffee shop in Oklahoma, and I was reading through the Bible, but I was reading the Action Bible was what I used for this time. And I think about it now.
Are you talking about the comic book Bible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think about it now as like a grown man sitting in a coffee shop, and I'm just reading the Action Bible, like comic books. Like, man, I probably looked like such a dweeb to those people.
But I love that picture, though.
Yeah.
Because it's really well done. It's got great artwork. I think most of my kids have read it. And it's meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
And so if you're like, man, I just got to get the overview, read that Action Bible, man.
And I was trying really at that point, I was like, man, I want to get the stories. I want to see them. I want to experience these stories more than what my own brain sometimes can fathom.
Yeah.
And that was a Bible for me at the time that did that. But I think for the piece of how do you teach people the word, one, and I say this with a desire to see humility in this and to see why do you want to teach people the word. I think that that's a good place to start as somebody that feels a need or a desire to teach is why. If it's out of a conviction, I love it. But if it's out of a desire to feel important or to feel like you're contributing or that God will love you more or that you can earn something, I would just check that. Because,
that's great.
Because I think when I wanted to begin teaching the people the word, there were often times where my whole heart behind it was I need to prove to them that I belong here. And so that would just be from personal experience. I don't know where you're at in your faith, and maybe this is a seasoned dude that's just like, hey, I just want to do this well, which is what I hope. But that would be a big piece is why do you want to teach people the word? And I think if you can get the why down, the how and the who will take care of itself.
Oh, that's really good.
If you're committed to God, or you're committed to His word, and you're committed just to being faithful to the text and to the people. But I think that's a key piece is why. And then the who is important. Finding yourself in a situation where you can communicate effectively. And it's not like I would never recommend everyone who wants to teach the word to start in student ministry, because the kids will destroy you if you're not built to teach in student ministry. And some people, same for men. So figure out who your who is as well in this teaching of the Bible, whether it's prayerfully, like, Lord, who do I need to learn this for? Obviously myself, but is there anybody that you're laying on my heart? Is there a conviction of it's men, or it's I want to teach kids and I want to serve at Tab Kids,
or my children?
Yeah, my own children. Yeah, I want to be a part of doing this with my wife, whatever that is. But I think as you dial in your who, that can also begin to break down some of the study habits and different things and what you need to be looking at, so you can break things down for them in that aspect. And then ultimately, I think what it comes down to is never stop learning yourself.
Yeah.
Because often in a attempt to be a teacher, you can stop being a learner. And I think you've said it to me multiple times, is that leaders are readers.
Yeah.
And so spend time in Scripture. Don't just read the Bible to teach it. Read the Bible to be taught by it.
Yeah.
And I think that is some of the key pieces to that. Be humble, be faithful, and trust that you'll never teach anybody anything. Only the Spirit of God will.
That's well said.
Because I don't know. That's my own pride coming to the surface of there are moments where it's like, well, did I say it right? I was like, who freaking cares?
Yeah.
Did you do what you think you were supposed to do? If your heart was right in it, He's going to do the work. And
there's really good news.
Yeah.
And the good news is that it's not how much information you've got downloaded that you can download into other people.
Right.
The information won't save you.
Nope.
We talked about this at our last pastors' meeting. God is love.
Mm-hmm.
He's been love from eternity.
Yep.
The point of this is to bring us into relationship with Him. That's love.
Yep.
And the whole idea of progressively changing us, progressive sanctification, is to make me more loving.
Yeah.
So you can have all the knowledge in the world and not be loving.
Yep.
You can know the Bible cover to cover and not be loving.
Yep.
And you can know very little, but love God and with heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And the second one is more spiritual than the first.
Yep.
Because the point is to make us more loving.
That's huge. And I think as well, and the people that I've taught, is the Bible study is important, but the relationship is even more important. So taking time that when you're teaching the word, sometimes that's not Bibles open. Sometimes that's life on life, right?
Yeah.
That's at the coffee shop. That's at the going to get some wings. I wish more people wanted to get wings when they studied the Bible.
Oh, yeah, wings in the Bible.
Because everybody's like, hey, you want to go get coffee? And it's like,
I don't need more coffee. I need
my
wings.
stomach, like, let's go get some
Maybe it's because they
wings.
don't want to get smudges on the pages.
Yeah, that's a good
Unless they're
point.
using
Well,
iPad
if you use
Bible.
boneless wings and forks, like
Hey, you
barbarians.
mentioned CBD Bible.
Yeah.
I have a confession.
Okay.
I now own a CBD Bible.
Let's go.
FCA sent me a CBD Bible.
Well, you got
it's
one
a nice
too.
one, dude.
I didn't know if you got one
Yeah,
too, so I didn't want
yeah.
to ask you about it.
Yeah, dude. They sent me a
They hooked it up.
It was a hook. It was a sweet gift.
Yeah.
We love Fellowship of Christian
Yes,
Athletes.
absolutely.
But apparently they think I need a CBD Bible.
That's
I mean,
right.
I got stacks of Bibles, but I don't
Yes.
have a CBD.
And it's a nice one.
It's a nice
It
one.
is. I got the
dude.
same
I
one.
think I'm gonna do my next fight club. I'm gonna use the CBD Bible.
Nice.
Just because I love you and Adam, and I want to make sure you're not heretics.
Yeah, I got a new one too. It's upstairs. I just
You
got
need
it.
to calm down.
No,
dude.
I bought the in my defense.
Your
I bought
Bible
this-
budget's cutting into your golf budget.
No, it's not. Hope gets tips at work now, and we've prayed about. No, I'm just kidding. But I bought this one in August, and it just came in. So, and it was I got an allotment of wedding gift money that we put into a slush, whatever you want,
For fun. That's
and
that's
it
cool.
is easily 2 pounds lighter than my Skylar, and I was like, this is much nicer in my backpack. So sweet, yeah. All right. Question number 3. If I want to give God my unreserved yes, do I have to become a pastor? Am I less special if I'm not a pastor?
Okay. First, before we answer the question, I've said before, every staff member, especially every teaching pastor that we add to our team, changes our DNA and our values in a positive direction. I don't know this person, but he's using vernacular from you.
Yep.
And you have impacted the DNA of our church, because I've heard Tim use that phrase. I use that phrase all the time now. So does Ben.
Yeah.
And that's just a shout out, first of all, to you for letting
Yeah.
God use you.
Yep.
But second, the way none of this belongs to any of us. This is
Absolutely.
all God's. And
Yeah.
God decided, dude, this is just I'm not trying to make you be
No,
emotional,
I'm with you.
but just a little sidebar that God decided that the Tabernacle needed to add unreserved yes Give him your yes.
Yeah.
That's Britton speak. And so credit to you
Yep.
and credit to God. So
And I stole it too.
yeah, you stole it. Yeah. Hey, if the bullet fits, shoot it. That's
yeah.
what every wise pastor says to
for sure.
every other one. But do you have to become a pastor? Of course not.
No.
Are you less special if you're not a pastor? Of course not. Matthew chapter 9 says the world's greatest need is more workers, more laborers.
Yeah.
That's what that was his prayer request. We need more workers in the harvest field. Pastors' jobs are to train and equip the saints, Ephesians chapter 4, to do the work of the ministry.
Yep.
In 2 Corinthians 5:20, we're all called to be Christ's ambassadors. So of course not.
Yeah.
But can you be a pastor and not be on a staff getting paid to be a pastor? Yes.
Yeah.
Pastor is an office, shepherd, teacher, counselor, guide, but pastor's also a gifting.
Yeah.
It's a gift. There's tons of people, men and women, that have the gift of pastoring, and they use it outside of the vocation of pastoral ministry. Good. So, complete sidebar. My pet peeve, and I've been thinking about this and a little bit ticked off about this for years. I've been a part of ministries that they want to measure how many people got saved, how many made a recommitment, how many feel called to full-time Christian ministry. I hate the call for full-time Christian ministry because I believe every Christian is called to full-time Christian ministry. I know what they mean, but I don't like it. And I haven't fully fleshed it out. I don't know if I'm going to write a book, but
I'm with you too. And I don't know if that happens at a spirit event.
I don't think it does.
It might. I don't want to discount who God is and stuff like that, but I think that it's more of a life calling that begins to develop over time. But I would agree.
And is confirmed by the church.
Yep, 100%. Affirmation of the saints is huge. And I think that we don't rely or trust it enough. Everybody's too dependent on their own feelings. And I think that God uses his people to call his people at times. And I think that whenever we don't look at it through that lens, we can get very contorted just relying on ourselves to navigate our way through life. But I would agree 100% with you.
Well, even your own experience.
Yeah.
So, which is similar. I remember being at an event, and I love the way they called. I was actually in Florence, Italy, and they said, "If you're called, will you say yes?"
Yeah.
And that's where I said yes, if I'm called.
Yep.
And then it wasn't until 33 that a church called.
Yep.
You had already given God, hey, God, if you call me, didn't quite work out, first church or two, then you're on a missions trip, but you're just, God, I'm out here doing the things. And then I know you're called here for two reasons. One, I called you.
Yeah.
And you said yes.
Yep.
And two, over the past years, it's been confirmed.
Yep.
By so many people, this is the guy, this is the guy, this is the guy. So we know that Britton is called.
Right.
But even if that had never happened, I got a feeling you'd have still been giving God your yes, even if it wasn't in full-time vocational ministry.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the whole piece too, is really figuring out what does that yes look like? How do I say yes as a mechanic and different things like that? Because I think it's not one, I would say this, and I say this with, don't be a pastor if you don't have to. Like Alistair Begg said that in a sermon, and I know we quote him a lot because the dude's wise, he's faithful, and he's humble, and he's consistent. We don't have that enough in large church Christian leadership in this country. So he's a faithful dude that's worth quoting often. But don't be a pastor if you don't have to. That's my biggest, I think of a guy that's on our staff, and I can say this because I know he won't care. Dude had an awesome job. He did not need to be a pastor.
No.
But he had to.
He had to.
He couldn't shake it. He had to be a pastor.
And he walked away from a lot of money.
Right. And so that's the whole thing is don't be a pastor for the sake of feeling like you'll know. You'll know. And I think about I was listening to a guy talk about, or it wasn't a guy, it was Heather Bush last night. She was talking about when she went to college. People are like, so what are you going to college for? And she's like, to play basketball. I'm like, well, what are you going to? She's like, I'm going to college to play basketball. And that was my whole thing is I went to college and I didn't know. And I think that was on purpose because as I get to the latter years, I was thinking through this the other day and it was like, man, God, you're sovereign, you're good, and you knew. You knew what was going to happen here because I didn't know. But as I've gone through and looked at, and I remember moving back to Oklahoma and trying to figure out, well, I'm not in ministry anymore, so what am I going to do? And what I found was I was in ministry. And so I think that's the biggest piece is it's not a vocation, it's a lifestyle. And so saying yes to Jesus, I'm going to say this as well. Saying yes to Jesus isn't just works-based. Your unreserved yes isn't just about doing things for other people. Your unreserved yes is just as much about your own spiritual life as it is about others. And so if your yes is just built on what is the work I can do, which is a good thing, but what other yeses can you say that Christ might be trying to do in you and in your heart as well? So,
Yeah, that's good.
that's all I got on that. Question number 6, I believe, is where we're at on this page. How do I balance being compassionate and being a warrior while maintaining my faith?
That's a great question. And I love that it was asked both ways. A compassionate, so this is a dude that wants to remain loving or tender, and a warrior at the same time. And, the knee-jerk response would be, oh, he's talking about how do I be like David? But I would double down and say, no, be like Jesus, because David wasn't perfect. He was compassionate and a warrior. Here's a guy that could play the Psalms, but also a guy who killed giants. He was literally leading men into battle. And so he is a shadow of who Jesus was, who is the most loving and the most fierce at the same time. And so that's who we're supposed to be like. So just some practical things. I just jotted down 5 things that the first 5 things came to my mind.
Boom.
And if you want to add some to them, first, a compassionate warrior, a man after God's own heart, is not ruled by fear, not fear of man, not fear of culture, not fear, I dare say, even of death, not fear of being humiliated, there's nothing that he's going to be afraid of. This has been attributed to multiple dead guys, but it's that saying that starts with fear nothing but God, hate nothing more than sin, and love nothing more than Jesus Christ and Him crucified. That's a tender warrior.
Yeah.
But it starts with no fear.
Yeah.
Second, you got to fight against complacency.
Yep.
I mean, to be a warrior, you got to fight, and complacency, has to do with idolatry, immorality, grumbling, different stuff like that. It's always this, woe is me, I deserve better. I think a warrior for Christ has a childlike faith. That's the unreserved yes. I got a little granddaughter who's not even 2 years old, and she learned how to say the word shark, and she almost always gives us her unreserved yes when we say, hey, say shark, just because we want to hear it again and we want to have a giggle, right? So it's that childlike faith. And then I said, be teachable. And that includes both being rebuked, or open to correction, humble, so you can learn. And then last, just get after it. Like a compassionate warrior gets after it, loving God and loving people, full bore. And it is an adventure. Live in that way.
100%.
There's probably some you could add to that list, but
I don't know if I need to add anything. I would just echo some of those, because I just know the personality types of the dudes that are like, man, I want to be a warrior. But I think that teachability and that humility is a key piece, because whatever your personality type, if you're asking a question like that, you're probably a dude that's ready to get after it, but you're probably also a dude that could potentially stand on people if you're not careful.
That's good.
And so that humility.
What does it not look like?
Yeah, I think just that piece of so often that standing on people thing is, I can get fired up about this thing and I'll lose sight of the relationship, love aspect in the effort to be a warrior and or
to be right.
Yes. And I think it's built out of a desire for truth to be communicated. I don't think it's a innately bad desire, but I think how you communicate that is key. And I think that comes back to the compassionate piece. So you can tell that person is really wanting to see compassion lead the way in their warrior spirit. But I would just always be aware and surround yourself with people that can call you on your crap.
Yeah.
That would be the biggest piece. And then get after it. Don't back down. The world needs more people that are fired up about the gospel and want to love people where they're at. And so that would be my biggest piece.
It's interesting. There's a few people in my life and in your life that are the perfect picture of tender and warrior.
Yep.
I think of Foster.
Yeah.
I mean, he's tender. I don't want to tangle with him. Not about the Bible, not about, that's why when he calls about accountability stuff, I'm like, I'm a little bit afraid of this guy.
Yeah,
right?
Right.
But I think most of us err on one side or the other.
Right.
We're either all compassion with no courage, the warrior spirit, or we're all courage and we got no compassion.
Yep.
So one or the other, I mean, you got to shore up where you're weak.
Yep.
And so, man, if you're all the warrior, you always want to pick a fight for the kingdom. Maybe spend a little more time reading the Psalms,
Yeah, right.
The Psalms of lament.
Yeah.
Maybe spend more time reading about Jesus' interaction with children and with women.
Yep.
and with seekers.
Yeah.
And then if you're more compassionate, but you struggle with the warrior part, man, read Joshua.
Yeah.
Read a little bit more of the Old Testament.
Yep.
Read about, Jesus saying hard things to people.
Yep.
And not being afraid, knowing that they wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's a balance.
Absolutely, 100% a balance. Love that. Sweet. The next question I've got is on page 4. I think that's where you're at as well. What are the best passages for the loss of a loved one?
Best passages. I actually looked up a few.
Yeah,
and
I've got some jotted down as well.
Probably the go-to is Psalm 29? Psalm 23.
Yep.
The whole I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. One of my favorites, I actually use this at funerals quite often, is from 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 through 4. If it's all right, I'm just going to read it because, man, there's been a lot of death. It feels like.
Yeah.
And if it's not just within our church, it's people in our church who've lost someone or people that love someone that's not in our church has lost someone. And it says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God." And so essentially it says, God brings comfort, and in all of our afflictions, and then it speaks directly to the purpose, that there's a purpose and a plan. Now, I wouldn't go up to someone in a funeral that's just lost a child or, just lost a spouse and be like, hey, God's got a plan for this. Let's look for the pony in this big pile of manure.
Right.
And it's like, no, but reminding them the implications that God is in control, that God is a God of comfort. I don't know. Which ones would you point them to?
Well, I pulled up a document that I have that we get to glean wisdom often here, especially as a young guy. And this was from a class that John Williams had taught to Adam Sharp and I. And these were some of his scriptures he often uses
at the hospital
when faced with tragedy and different things like that. And one of his that he broke down extensively was Psalm 130. And he just talks about how, and we can go there, Psalm 130.
I love how I'm flipping pages and you're pushing buttons.
See who wins. Got him.
If it had been in the Gospels, I'd have beat you. Psalms are like
I'm just glad the Wi-Fi's fast now. Thanks, Matt.
But
Psalm 130, verse 5, I wait for the Lord, I wait and put my hope in his word. I wait for the Lord more than watchmen for the morning, more than watchmen for the morning. Israel, put your hope in the Lord, for there is faithful love with the Lord, and with him is redemption in abundance. And what Pastor John broke down for Adam and I is that there's hope in his word, but also that in this text, our hope is in the Lord, but there's 2 Greek versions of the word hope here in this, and it talks about straining and it talks about waiting. And so that was a cool aspect that Pastor John Williams broke down for Adam and I, was just like, this is going to be hard. Finding hope in the Lord is difficult sometimes. It's not always easy. It's not, doesn't always feel good. And I think that that's a good thing to in those moments be compassionate with people and understanding that there's a strenuous piece of hoping in the Lord as well sometimes, but also this picture of just waiting.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest piece for that, passages for the loss of a loved one, or how do we, I think at the end of the day, this question, the root of it is, how do I love people that have lost somebody, whether it be a loved person that I've lost, and how am I going to love myself or deal with the circumstance, whatever that might be, is the key pieces I would point to are just patience, and trusting the character that we know of God. Don't question the stuff that you don't know, of why did he cause this to happen or anything like that. But I think as you look at his word and as you continue to spend time digging deeper into the characteristics of God of which we know, I think we can definitely find hope in the fact that we serve a God that is love, and we serve a God that brings and delivers hope, and we serve a God that is present. And so I think that those are key things, because I think often in tragedy or hard times, we instantly go to this place of questioning who we might perceive God to be in this moment instead of remembering who we know him to be. And so that would be a biggest piece that I would encourage in those moments. But yeah. And
that actually reminds me of a story, and I'll leave out some of the details to protect the innocent, of which is my wife. But years ago, she was going through a dark time. The one detail I will share, we'd lost a child.
Mm.
We lost a pregnancy, and she was devastated and just really sent her into a really dark place. And I'll never forget the pastor of the church that we were members of. The pastor's wife went out of her way to spend time with my wife, just in a real personal way. And I noticed after that meeting that Darcy is deep in the Word. Not that she didn't read the Bible before, but she's always in the Word. And as we started talking about it, what she had been advised to do was to start reading the Psalms. Now, I love the instruction that came with it, because she was like, well, there's a lot of Psalms. Which Psalm should I read? And this lady, Susie Callum, I think her name was, I believe I got the story right, said, just start reading the Psalms until God speaks to you through one of them. And she had to read a lot of Psalms before, and it was just like, why am I doing this? I'm just reading these Psalms, and, sometimes David is happy, sometimes he's sad, kill my enemies, and then it's the, songs or Psalms of lament, Psalms of ascent. And then all of a sudden, the Psalm started reading Darcy. And then I see her with a pen or highlighter, just like, that was for me, that was for me, that was for me. And that's that picture of, just don't read the Bible to get what you can get out of it. But it's like, hey, would your word, or would you, as I'm reading your word, would your word read me? And she got to that place. And it was, I'm forever grateful for that woman, because I've used that so many times, including right now.
That's good.
There's been times in my own life when it's like, just start reading it until the thing that God wants me to get, or wants me to hear, or wants me to say. That's how God's personal, I think. So,
and it's a good thing the Psalms are long too. Like, hey, read the book of Jude. And then it's like, okay, well,
Jude, that'll take like 5 minutes, maybe less.
Yeah. Martin, we get it. It'll take you a couple weeks.
Oh, poor Martin.
I'm just kidding.
We'll rip it on Martin. He doesn't even listen to this podcast, I bet.
I know, but we were talking about it upstairs. He's funny. Love Martin Rizzi. Those dudes are, Adam and Martin are doing real pastor stuff, man. Love those guys. Anyways, I think that's it. And I think too, find hope. And I think the key piece is just spending time in his word. Don't let the hard time drag you away from him, but allow it to bring you closer. And next question we have, after salvation, if a man lives in habitual sin or addiction, was that man really genuine in giving his heart to God? Can a man be truly repentant of his sin, yet still live in a habitual sin?
Yeah, this question we get a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not dancing when I say it's above our pay grade.
Yep.
So if you've got a specific man in mind, I don't know. If a man lives in habitual sin or addiction, was that man really genuine in giving his heart to God? I don't know. There's a lot of genuine addicts. There's a lot of genuine sinners that genuinely give their heart to God, and they still struggle. The struggle with sin, I don't believe we're free from until we see Jesus face to face.
Yeah.
I think we're in this, and people progress at different rates.
Yep.
I think we've answered questions similar to this before, if not in this one, then in questions women ask.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know a man's heart.
Right.
But I think the heart behind this, can a man be truly repentant of his sin, yet still live in a habitual sin? Well, it depends on how you define repentance.
Right.
If repentance is a turning from sin and turning to God, you might do that 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
There is freedom.
Yeah.
Paul, in one of my favorite passages, I've said before, it's like my life verse, Romans 7, I do not do what I want to do, and what I want to do, I don't do.
Right.
And if I do what I don't want to do, and he's like a dog chasing his tail, who will save me from this body of death? The good news is even in the chasing of my tail, where I'm like, as the Psalms say, I'm a dog returning to its vomit. I'm coming back to that same sin that I've asked God to supernaturally deliver me from.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think you can still be saved and still struggle.
Yep.
And I can see there's a lot of people that kind of pray a prayer to get fire insurance and then go right back to their sin with no intention of leaving it. So, I think it was a Puritan, John Owen, who's credited with saying, be killing sin, or sin will be killing you. And so our sin separates us from God, but our sin also separates us from ourselves. It hurts us. It separates me from God. My sin separates me from you, and my sin separates me from who God has called me to be.
Yep.
And so I got to want to put sin to death.
Yep.
Sorry, I could talk about
No,
that.
I'm with
forever,
that, and I think you're hitting on a key piece there. The question is, if somebody wasn't saved, why would they want to repent in the first place? And I think that is something we have to key in on the fact of if you are feeling convicted for your sin, that is evidence of your salvation. Because
Good.
how do we know that we have received the Holy Spirit? We've said yes to Jesus, we've surrendered everything, we've repented of our sin. It isn't a one-time deal; it's a lifestyle that you live from then on out. But I don't know anybody that knows God that is repentant of things that they don't believe to be true. And so that I don't know if that was a clear way of saying that.
No, that's very clear.
But I think
that's evidence. You
yeah.
said it's the fact that you're in the fight
Yep.
against sin. You're
Yep.
saying is evidence of the Holy Spirit's conviction. You may not always win.
Yep.
And you don't use that as an excuse to continue doing it.
Right.
Sorry.
But there's that attitude of repentance that it takes time. Certain sins in certain people's lives take longer to kill, whereas there are certain sins that don't take as long to kill. Like for me, this is my own personal testimony. There are certain things in my life that have been a battle and a struggle that I have fought against and I'm actively fighting against every single day. But there are certain things that, it got killed immediately. I no longer have done drugs since giving my life to Jesus. For some people, that's different. But for me and my testimony, that was the thing that was like, okay, I got that. But there are still other things and aspects of my life that for me to follow that are still, man, I got to repent of that again. Back here again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think that is a key piece. And then the other piece, that I remember I got the opportunity to preach on this on the weekend about blatant unrepentant sin. But that word repentance there points to the fact that that's evidence of salvation, in my opinion. If somebody is repentant of their sin, if they're living in an effort to continue to be shaped and changed and sanctified by God, we don't get to be God of their process. But if we have somebody that says, "Oh yeah, I'm a Christian," but there isn't repentance of that sin, that would be where I think that we could lovingly, as Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, call to attention to that person, like, hey, you're living in this sin, you're unrepentant, it's blatant, you don't give a crap. You need to stop claiming that you're following Jesus. But navigate that carefully. Matthew 18 is key in that. You don't come talk to anybody else about that. You talk to the individual. You bring a brother or you bring a sister, and then you maybe bring a pastor at that point if there's blatant unrepentant sin. But those are tough waters to navigate. We're not God, and I think that if you're writing this question and maybe you're listening to this podcast, I'm assuming, but maybe I shouldn't assume, but you're probably asking this question about yourself.
Could be.
And it's shaped in a way. So I would say if you have a desire to repent, if you have a desire to change, get help. Surround yourself with people that will hold you to a standard. You don't have to do it by yourself. Trust that God and His Spirit is good enough to help you through that process. But if you have a desire to repent, you have a desire to change, find hope in the fact that God is dwelling in you and He is continuing to shape you into the image of Him. So that would be
That was well said.
Yeah.
I got nothing to add to that.
Yep.
Or as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I have to say about that.
And now we got a long page here.
Oh, yeah.
Long one.
With some juicy ones.
Yeah, first one. Let's go.
Wait, are we on page 6?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to start at number 1. Ready
Let's
for that
do
one?
it. I'm ready.
Sweet.
Bring it on.
Question number 1. Why are women supposed to be silent in the church?
Haha.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start with one that could make people mad on all sides.
Yes.
Right? So first of all, I would say women are not supposed to be silent in the church, but I know what they're referencing. They're referencing, actually, we're in a series in 1 Corinthians, and it's referring to 1 Corinthians. And, we always tell people context is everything, and the best commentary on the Bible is the Bible. And so I assume that they've made a judgment based on a verse, and it comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 14, starting in verse 33. It says, God is not a God of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints. And here's the key in verse 34. The women should keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but should be in submission. As the law also says, if there's anything they desire to learn, let them ask their husbands at home, for it is shameful for a woman to speak in church. And so the context, and like I said, we'll be covering this in our series.
Yep.
I believe, and there's respected Christians that may or may not disagree with me, that we're talking about the spiritual authority of preaching, specifically being the lead spiritual authority in a church.
Yep.
Not that a woman could never be silent, that women always have to be silent, they can never speak. And we know this because previously in chapter 11, verse 3, it speaks about a woman when she prays, she should pray with her head covered. And so we knew that women are speaking in the church. They're praying within the church. Yeah. That's not silent.
Right.
It talks about singing together. So we need the women to help us sing and to lead us in singing. And so I believe in 1 Corinthians 14 that it is speaking specifically about the teaching process. There are some people that might say that they shouldn't blurt out questions in the middle of a message, but they should ask their husbands. Maybe they used that type of a style in Corinth where there was a speaker and then there'd be a Q&A time.
Yeah.
But it isn't that women are strictly forbidden from speaking in church. Now, there's churches that I respect, men that I respect, people in my own family that, not my immediate family here in Michigan, but my extended family, that believe that a woman, it's fine to be a lead pastor. Personally, I think what the whole counsel of God teaches, and I would have to also direct you to 1 Timothy chapter 2, where Paul talks about that a woman is prohibited from having spiritual authority over a man. Now, that's a weird thing to say.
Right.
Because as a lead pastor of our church, I don't look at myself and be like, oh, I am the spiritual authority.
Right.
But I do view that as ultimately I'm responsible. So when I ask you to preach on a weekend, or I ask Tim, or I ask Ben, or Martin, or Seth, or anyone, I am delegating the responsibility that's been given to me to someone else.
Yep.
My understanding of Scripture is at some point that might be a woman.
Yeah.
I'm not asking a woman to take my job,
right?
But I'm asking a woman to teach.
Yeah.
Now, if she's teaching something that, or anyone, whether woman, whether you, like if you got up there and just blurted something straight heretical, let's say Britton in the next month is asked to preach and he said, listen, give your life to something, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, or whatever, I'd probably stop you in the middle, or if I was gone, I'd come back the next week and say, that was straight lie. Yeah. That's wrong. And now Britton's under, you would never say that, but, but it doesn't strictly forbid them from ever speaking in church. And this is important. Sorry, as you could tell, I'm talking 100 miles an hour. Yeah. We've had a female staff member pray over the offering. I get emails.
Yeah.
Why is a woman speaking in church? And it's like, don't be dumb.
Right.
I shouldn't say don't be dumb, but I know the heart that it comes from.
Right.
Is a very misogynistic, sexist kind of point of view that wants to use the Bible to keep women in their place.
Yeah.
And that's just the worst kind of man.
Yep.
That's not what the Bible is teaching. It's talking about here in 1 Corinthians 14. It's talking about preaching.
Yeah.
In specific, and in the context of Corinth, he was trying to bring order from disorder.
Yes.
So the Bible, I disagree with the question. So yeah.
No, I agree with everything you just said. I don't think I need to explain it again. And I think too, the piece of that, like you said, something that for some people, just in the culture that we live, that idea of like you are the spiritual authority of our church. As our lead pastor, my role in this church is to submit to God and to submit to you as my leader. That is as a staff. That is how this thing works. And I think something that people often forget in that process is that you are also submitting.
Yeah, thanks for saying that.
And I think another thing that people forget in that process is you're going to be held responsible for everything that happens here.
That's scary. I don't want this job anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think often people think that this is almost like this like narcissistic culture of like we do everything. It's like, no. Like the thought of being held accountable for everything that happens at Foundry Student Ministries makes me shake.
Yeah.
And I think that as a church, we need to know and understand that we, one, first and foremost, all submit to God. Jesus is our lead pastor. We say that all the time here. But two, I speak as a member of this church, not as a guy that's on the podcast or a guy that's on the teaching team, is we are submitting to a pastor that is submitting to Christ, that has a desire to see him glorified first and foremost, and there is no agendas here. And that's why I'm a member of this church. That's
good.
I'm on staff of this church or whatever,
right.
But I would be a member of this church no matter where I lived, no matter what my circumstance. If I was never called into ministry, this would be a church I wanted my family to go to for that reason. And so I think that as a church, we need to remember that we're not just submitting to a guy that wants a stage. We're submitting to a guy that wants to glorify Christ and everything he does, and he has thought about it. As much as you think somebody has, and I needed to say that.
No, I appreciate that. And if people are saying, yeah, but submitting to what?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm submitting to God. I'm submitting to his word.
Yep.
I'm also submitting to a board of directors that holds me accountable.
Yep.
Not just for, am I teaching rightly,
Mhm.
but also, am I loving rightly? Am I resting rightly? Am I leading rightly?
Mhm.
But there's more.
Mhm.
But wait,
Yeah.
there's more. We have our pastoral team. There's, what are there, 8 of us? 7 or 8 of us, yeah.
7.
Including youth pastors.
Yep.
In that forum, I sit as I heard another pastor say, as first among equals. First not being the most important.
Right.
It was I was here first.
Yep.
And I was called first.
Yep.
But among equals.
Mhm.
And in that meeting, I've been called out before.
Mhm.
Guys have questioned stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking a time where our campus pastors had a very serious question.
Yeah.
And they were like, is this what this means? And it turned into a great conversation. And at the end of it, I was grateful to them
Yep.
for wanting clarification on something.
Yes.
They were grateful that I was open to it. Because I'm going to tell you, if I've got 7 other of our teaching pastors that are like, John's lost it,
Mhm.
I'm going to listen. And if I don't listen, the board's going to listen.
Right.
And then beyond that, we
Yep.
have other pastors. You and I are both a part of Forge, where
Yep.
we have men that know way more about preaching and theology
Yes.
and leadership than we do.
Yeah.
They regularly keep us accountable
Yep.
for things. And so,
And we have wives
oh my,
that are also.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the junior Holy Spirit in my
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
She is the junior Holy Spirit in
Yep.
my life. She's not
Yeah.
this happy, clappy,
Yep.
as she would say if we ever get on this podcast. She's not up there going, Johnny V, Johnny
Yeah.
V. I mean, almost every message is, yeah, when you said that one thing.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, but what about the 99 that I got right?
I know. Yeah, I'm with you. Am I allowed to recommend the book we're reading right now?
Of course.
Yeah, I think too, if this is a question that is whether you agree, disagree, indifferent, I would encourage you. It's a short book. It's
almost
an
a
easy
pamphlet.
read. Yeah. By Kathy Keller, who is the wife of Tim Keller, who is a pastor of a church in New York City, and it's called Jesus, Justice, and Women in Ministry.
Or, Jesus, Justice, and Gender Roles.
And gender roles, my bad.
Yeah.
And she does a beautiful job of talking about the hermeneutic behind the verse that John just read and different things like that. It's a short read, so if that's something maybe you want to know more about, it's a super easy, simple read. And so, yeah, that would be a recommendation.
Yes.
I've read it. It took me about 30 minutes.
And I don't want to steal all the thunder from the sermon or the sermons that are going to cover this, because I've been looking forward to them with fear and trembling.
Yeah.
Because culture is going to call us sexist, misogynistic. There might be people in our own church that are like, we've been fed lines for so long that it's all about equality. Yep. Anything a woman can do, a man can do. Anything a man can do, a woman can do. That's simply not true.
Yep.
That is not true. That is a lie from the pit of hell. God values both genders.
Mm-hmm.
Women are not less than.
Mm-hmm.
As a result of our curse, we've both been given roles that we're called to fulfill, and it's a symbol of our fallenness.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with one gender dominating another gender. Not in the church, not in the home, not in the family, not in culture.
Yeah.
And we've lost that to the point where, faith and being true to the Bible is going to look really countercultural for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so it just needs to be said that women are valued by God.
Mm-hmm.
If you need any proof of that, Jesus appeared to women first after his death and burial and resurrection.
100%.
And we see it all throughout Scripture. So.
Yeah. So come to that message. Be present in that. The next question we have on this page is: does God allow those that are good people and never took the steps towards Christianity into the afterlife?
Yes. But it's not the afterlife that I think you're thinking about.
I knew you were going to do that.
Yes, Acts 4:12 says it succinctly what all the gospel says. Peter was asked, how then can we be saved? And he said, there is only one name by which you can be saved. If you're expecting that your good works will receive you into heaven, you're trying to be saved by your name.
Yep.
You're trying to be saved by your name.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one name, and it's the name Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And so, no, there's no second chance. The Bible also says it's appointed man once to die, then to face judgment. Mm-hmm. So, yes, you'll be welcomed into the afterlife, but as Matthew 25 says, unto the sheep or to the goats, the sheep to eternal rest in heaven with God, and goats into eternal damnation and hell.
Yeah.
And I love saying it that way, damnation and hell, because it's that serious. I've recently been listening to a guy that puts it this way, and I've
My Bible died.
stolen it. He said, only or either Jesus will pay for your sins, his name, or you will pay for your sins.
Good.
One way or another, sins are going to be paid for. And so people are always like, well, why do we need a hell? Because sin has to be paid for. In God's economy, in his character and his nature, sin has to, he's a just God. Sins have to be atoned for. So either you receive Christ and his atonement, or he'll let you atone for him forever.
So can I ask you a question?
Of course.
I'm asking this out of just the lens that I want to provide clarity to people. What would you say to the theology that has been really pushed forward as of recently being the past few years, of this God is love, and how could a loving God ever actually send people to hell? What would be your response to the people that maybe have been fed that lie or believed that piece?
Right. So how could a good and loving God ever condemn someone to an eternity in hell?
Yep.
The apologetics answer, and this is my course of study in seminary, which I didn't finish, just to be clear. Not the course, the seminary. I got busy doing ministry and was like, I'll wait to finish the degree. 20 years later, I haven't done it. But the most loving thing for a loving God to do with someone that didn't want God's love is to send them to hell or to allow them to go to hell. I think C.S. Lewis says the same thing. And so sin separates us from God, and hell eternally separates us from God. And so for God to force a person into his presence for eternity that doesn't want to be there, that's unloving. God is a respecter of persons. I believe he's a respecter of our free will, especially in regards to our eternal destiny.
Yeah.
And so we are not bodies with spirits, as C.S. Lewis says. We are spirits with bodies. And so that spirit in God's image is eternal because he's a perfect and loving God that not eternal from the beginning of time, but since we've been created, we have been created to live forever. And so we'll either live forever with him or we will live forever without him.
Yeah.
And living forever without him, it's that separation. That is what the Bible describes as hell.
Yeah, and I think in that description as well, clarifying that God doesn't make that choice, we do.
That's a better way to, or a quicker way to say it.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's that whole piece of that separation piece that eternity doesn't start after life. It starts here on earth, and it starts with surrendering to the gospel.
And there's other theories that are out there. Yeah. There's philosophers and theologians that have monkeyed with, those, they'll be punished for a little while, but then he'll just do away with their souls forever. That's called annihilationism, that you'll just cease to exist. But these are all attempts to kind of candy coat what the scripture says, and I don't think we can afford to go beyond what the Bible says. And so if the Bible says it, I believe it, that's where I'm going to live, because he hasn't told me anything else.
Yep.
And so whether that happens, it also begs the questions, well, will people get one more chance, a second chance, a third chance? The Bible doesn't say that.
Right.
It doesn't say that.
Yeah.
So I'm responsible, as I'm learning the word for what it says.
Yep.
And I'm not going to take any liberties with what, in my mind, because all I'm doing then is recreating God in my own image, which is the highest form of idolatry.
Yes.
Instead of making an idol of a golden calf, I'm making a golden idol of me. And if I was God, this is what I would do. And so we got to just be really careful with that.
That's good. The next question on this page.
We're cranking them out.
Yeah. Benji, what's our time at? We're at an hour?
Yeah.
Let's do 2 more.
Sweet. That's fine.
2 more, and then we can finish it out.
Yeah, you can choose which one you like.
Yeah. We'll do one because I think where we live in the region we are, this is actually a relevant question, as simple as the answer might be. What does the Bible say about alcohol use?
Good. Well, the short version is, in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 18, Paul encourages us to not be drunk with wine, because this leads to all manner of sin, but to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And so essentially he's saying, don't make alcohol your idol. Don't drink alcohol to the point of being drunk. But he doesn't say, don't drink alcohol at all. We believe Jesus drank alcohol. He turned water into wine, and it's funny because legalists have always tried to kind of soften that.
Explain that away.
Yeah, sorry. Well,
You're
they'll say things like, "Well, back in the day, these are some of my favorite dumb answers. Back in the day, they couldn't find clean water, so they had to drink wine because it was more pure." It's like, well, when Jesus turned water into wine, I think you know how to find clean water,
right?
And so did those wandering in the wilderness. They knew where to find clean water, right? So that's a dumb excuse. And so when he turned water into wine, they actually said it was the best wine. And then I've heard some people say, well, it was the best wine because it was like, well, it's just grape juice, full of preservatives and no alcohol. And it's like, no. Paul says to Timothy, take a little wine for your stomach because of all these ailments that you've had. He had some stomach ailments, and Paul's like, man, what are you just on bread and water? Yeah. Take a little wine. It's good for your stomach or good for your insides. Yep. He's not telling all Christians to do it. He was talking to Timothy. Yep. And then I've heard some legalists say, well, what he really meant was that Timothy should rub the wine on his stomach. Straight up, dude. Straight up. I heard that at a pastor's conference, right? I mean, he was quoting another pastor that was trying to say that. So I believe what the Bible says is that for some people that can drink alcohol in moderation, that's not a sin. Yeah. For some people, that moderation always turns into all of it. You need to quit. Yep. And so this isn't a legalism. This is a personal decision that you have to make. If alcohol is a problem, you should probably quit it. Yep. Because we're not supposed to be dominated by anything. 100%. Right? So I don't know. What about you?
I agree.
You agree?
Yeah. I don't know. I think that's it. I agree. And I think, too, for the people that are like, well, I do use it in moderation, another thing is who are you using it around is a key. Because our effort is to love people. And so if you're around people that could become a stumbling block for them, or they could use you as what's the word I'm looking for?
Trying to be an example to somebody?
Yeah, you're trying to be an example for somebody, or somebody can use you as their, well, so-and-so does it, and so it must be okay. But I think being very careful and considering those around you when using alcohol, if you do deem that okay. And so I think that would just be another thing that I would encourage people as well. I don't know.
That's good.
Is there another question on there that sticks out to you that you want to do, or do you just want to pick one?
Yeah.
Which one?
I like the one about church membership because that always comes up.
Yeah.
Because usually it's a dude that's like, I don't need to be no member.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 6 on this page, is church membership really biblical?
Yeah. And I'm not saying this just because I'm a pastor. And after becoming a pastor, though, this clarified my thoughts because I had to research this. Yep. The answer is yes. Now, it's very important to say one thing we don't get in the Bible is here's the perfect structure of what church politics or the way a church will govern itself should look like. Now, even the word politics, you say the word politics and people are like, oh, I just hate politics. Everything in life is politics. A marriage is politics. Your relationship with your friends, with your family, with your kids, with your parents, it's all politics. The reason we say we hate politics is because of what culture has done with our government. We hate ugly politics, right? So we don't get to come to church politics and say, oh, I just hate church politics, because that's all of our relationships in church. So we see from Acts chapter 2, right after the New Testament church was born, that it says, and God daily added to their number those that were being saved. Somebody was counting, somebody was taking the roles. Then later on, we have the apostles exercising church discipline on Ananias and Sapphira, who were lying about their offering. Yep. And so they assigned some dudes to come in and be ready. God struck this guy down, and there was a structure. There was organization. Yep. There was church discipline. Yep. We see all through the New Testament and Paul's letters to real people that were really organized with elders and deacons. He talks about putting people out that are unrepentant in their sin and refuse to repent of blatant, gross, unrepentant sin. He's like, we got to put them out. Well, if they were never in, how do you put them out? Right. And so, yes, it's biblical. The manner of it is never strictly outlined in Scripture. There's some people that come to our church, and because we don't use elder, deacon, hey, Deacon Britton, or hey, Elder Tim, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That they would say we're being unbiblical. Yeah. So we know that there should be a structure. There's some loose principles of structure given in the book of Acts and through the epistles. But yes, it is biblical. And for us at our church, we actually inherited a structure that for us to function, we have to continue to function in that structure.
Yep.
Now, we can make changes to it, but
if you could briefly just break down that structure for somebody that maybe is wondering about it, or because that's not something that always gets talked about because we don't have like a membership class of what this looks like. So break that
we
down.
Have merge. Yeah. So essentially, we have a charter under the state of Michigan, and we have bylaws, and the bylaws state that we're going to have a board of directors. It doesn't say that they have to be men or women. That's why I'm very careful not to call it a board of elders.
Right.
Because 1 Timothy seems to imply that elders should be men who are able to teach. But we do have a board of directors, and that's the accountability structure that are voted by the membership, that the board nominates a pastor, but that the congregation of members, not the whole congregation, but those who are members, vote on who the lead pastor will be. That's my job. Then the lead pastor hires a staff that's approved by the board. So there's that structure. Any major changes to our bylaws are suggested by the board and then have to be approved by the congregation. So we're kind of in this model where, then someone would say, well, who are your elders? Well, we have that group of 7 or 8 teaching pastors who are responsible to be the collective spiritual authority of which I'm a part, one of many, because we have people on our board that can teach, and then we have some that aren't able to teach, but they're really, really good with numbers, or they're really, really good with administration, or they've been gifted with God's wisdom. So for us, we have that board of directors that holds me accountable. I hold a staff accountable, but I'm one of many with these other elders that we come together and make major theological decisions. Like we're trying to come up with a statement on it. Look, we need to know what we believe about women in ministry. And the short answer to that is we need women in ministry, paid and unpaid. But collectively, we're kind of coming to this belief. We want to follow 1 Corinthians and we want to follow what Paul said to Timothy. And it's like, they can have any job in this church except my job. So we're complementarian that way. But that's how the structure is. The structure has checks and balances. Is it perfect? No, because people aren't perfect. But what we don't want to be is we don't want to be these churches where the lead pastor is the final authority on everything. That's a cult.
I've been a part of one.
That's a cult. When there's no one checking him, that's a cult. And I've said it to our board. I've said it to our little elder group of pastors.
I've not been a part of a cult. Let me rephrase
sorry, not part of a cult. But no, you've been a part of a church where...
and I've seen, I mean, there was a small instance, just to give people a picture of it, where there was some disagreements that were going on in that individual's life with others. And instead of taking it to our staff or taking it to a board or anything like that, that individual deemed it necessary to add rejection statements to our belief statements.
Wow.
And that's what led to myself and a few other staff members resigning from that church.
So he was operating in a vacuum. So it's just like, I'm going to go into my prayer closet. It's me and God.
We reject these things. I don't. And so, but there was
we
no
don't
accountability to that.
We don't want a structure like that. And so kind of where I was going with my accountability is I've said to these people, while I'm still sane, because at any point, any leader can just have a hard heart and start pursuing self or self-preservation or preaching out of fear, or preaching what is contrary to God's word. While I'm still sane, you have permission to speak into my life. When I'm insane is when I need you to do it. And if I go insane, I need you to remove me. Remove me. And I've told these same people, you have authority to speak to my wife because she knows. Like my wife is never off limits from, hey, is John okay? Like I'm never going to be the guy that's like, hey, you got anything to say, you say it to me. You don't speak to my wife. Yeah, that's a problem, man. That is a problem.
Absolutely.
So you want to start a fight in church. That's one of the ways is start talking about church politics because people are sinful. But I think we have a good setup here. I think there's a lot of accountability. If I don't have enough accountability, I don't know how much more I can give.
And I would speak to it.
If you want to close cameras that follow me all the time.
I don't.
No.
If I could speak to it from a perspective of being a church member as well, in my because I was a member of another church before I took this position here, and that was a big move for me at that time. But what I had deemed in that moment was I want to follow Jesus as in the best possible way that I can. And for me, that was accountability. That was submission. And the best way to achieve that accountability of knowing that I would belong to something that would hold me to a standard was submitting to the authority of a church that was submitted to Christ.
Good.
And that was why it was important for me. That's why it's important for my wife and I to belong to a church together. Because I want to know, not just because I'm on staff here, but even if there was a moment where it was like, hey, we're not going to be on staff here, but we'll probably still go to this church, that this church would be okay with that, deeming the circumstance, obviously. But that I would be and belong to a place that would hold me accountable, would hold us accountable as a married couple. And I think that those things are key to my spiritual life.
Right.
In my best attempt to follow Jesus, I believe that in calling that the best attempt, church membership is necessary.
Yes.
If I didn't belong to a body that was holding me accountable, I wouldn't be doing everything I could to follow Jesus with everything I have.
Right.
Would be my own personal conviction.
Now, I don't know the heart with which someone might ask that question. So I don't want to read into the question, is church membership really biblical? If it came from a genuine, sincere, I don't see this and I want to see it.
Yeah.
We can go chapter and verse. You can go to gotquestions.org and
Yep.
it'll explain the whole thing to you.
Mm-hmm.
Just type that in. Is church membership biblical? But typically, I've been asked that question, or if it wasn't that direct, it's from someone that doesn't want accountability.
Mm.
And since this is a Questions Men Ask Part 3,
Yep.
it's usually a guy that wants to live unto himself, doesn't want anyone in his business,
Yep.
and wants his wife to do what he wants her to do,
Yep.
which is the worst.
Yes.
That guy's not compassionate and warrior. He just wants to be warrior, which is really more like buffoon.
Yeah.
And so I found myself saying, if you're a guy and you don't want to submit to God, His word, a pastor, a church, and a group of guys like a fight club,
Yeah.
if you're not willing to submit to all of those things and be accountable to those things, why should she ever want to submit to you? You are unsafe.
Nailed it.
You're unsafe. And we have seen it in our church when there's a time when there's a woman whose husband is acting unsafe, but because he was a member, we've been able to step in. And sometimes it's turned into repentance.
Yep.
And sometimes, I'm sad to say this has happened, the guy has said, well, I quit. I quit on her. I quit on church. I quit on God, and I'm going to go live a life unto myself. And even though that sounds like a defeat, that's actually a victory because she was in an unsafe place.
Yep.
Their kids were in an unsafe place. He needed to separate himself.
Yeah.
Now, that was with much tears and much love and much begging and pleading. Turn back to God. Turn back to this one that you asked for accountability when you were sane.
Yeah.
Now you've gone insane. And what I say by insane, it's usually a guy that's decided, well, God wouldn't want me to not be happy, and I'm unhappy. So I got to go trade her in for a newer model. I got to trade these kids in for and it's a sad, disgusting story, but it happens. And so to any man or woman or whoever who's listening right now, this is why you need membership.
Yep.
Because typically we'll hear something, hey, did you hear such and such? It'll be at a staff thing. And it's not a gossip way. Or somebody will come to me, hey, did you hear, there's something going on right there. And the implication is, John, can you do something about it? The first question I ask is I turn to one of our administrative people, is such and such a member? If they're not, and I don't have a relationship, there's nothing I can do.
Yep.
Then I do more damage than good if I just walk up to somebody, hey, I heard you're having an affair. But if I have a relationship, and even more so if you're a member, then if I come to you and say, hey, listen, somebody mentioned that there's some things going on.
Yeah.
And that's actually happened. That actually happened once with a board member years ago. Someone came up to me and then someone else said something to me. And I went to this board member, happened to be a man. And one-on-one I said, hey, listen, man, I hate to bring this up, but I had two different people mention this, and I'm on a board with you. I'm in membership with you. We're brothers in Christ. We're in Fight Club together. Is this true? And he looked at me, and it was unequivocally not true.
Yeah.
It was a bunch of stuff that wasn't true. And we talked together, and at first I was like, oh, I probably damaged the relationship. He came back a couple weeks later and said, thank you, because you took a big risk in asking me that. And as I've thought about it, I want a pastor who's willing to ask me that.
That's good.
And then he told me just this past year, because that was like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
He told me this past year, he said, John, do you remember that moment? And I forgot about it.
Yeah.
I have a bad memory. Or maybe maybe I just compartmentalized it because I was so afraid to even bring it up to this guy. But I knew that I had to. Biblically, I had to. Matthew chapter 18. I didn't talk about it. I went one-on-one and it was done. Because I found it wasn't true. He said, John, in that moment, you became my pastor. You weren't just a good talker that I had been a part of hiring to be our lead talker on a weekend. In that moment, you became my pastor. I've never forgotten that.
Good.
And so I think for all of us, that's a moment, even if you're not a pastor, that's a moment when we do follow Matthew 18 that you become a true friend or a trusted friend.
Really good. Love it.
Sorry, I start telling stories and it just goes.
It's all good.
And then there was another, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'll tell you guys some news at the end of this. It's going to make everybody happy. So, what's up, Benji? How you doing, bro? Sweet shirt. Yeah, that's all we got.
Questions men ask.
Part 3.
You know, there's some after questions here, and we should probably talk about this offline. But I've been thinking with our questions women ask segment, so many of those could just be questions people ask.
Right.
That when we get to those, we should probably have we'll have a questions women ask part 2. But then there needs to be just questions that people ask, you know, kind of like the leftover questions that could go either way.
Student ask.
Bring it on.
It's going to be a good one. So
bring it on. And then I'll sit here and bombard you and Adam.
Yes, I love it. Sweet. Well, shout out, you know what, man? Shout out the people that like the podcast.
There's someone named Claire.
That encourage us. Yeah, Claire.
Yeah, there's someone named Claire that I need to know about.
Serving her face off in Tab Kids, serving her face off in Foundry Student Ministries.
You showed me a video of Foundry Manistee where they were having too much fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
It was a dance party, and then I'm watching from this side of the table, and you're like, oh, those are leaders.
Yeah.
I mean, the leaders look more fun than the students.
Right, yeah, they are most of the time. But Claire, she listens to the podcast, she appreciates the podcast, and she hears us talk about brats quite a bit. And through that, she has purchased some.
She doesn't work at the meat store.
Some brats from Dublin. And so, I got to pick those up.
Where are those brats at?
They're at her house. She forgot to bring them last night. We're not mad at you, Claire. We're just disappointed.
We're not disappointed in you. We're disappointed there's no brats.
I'm disappointed in you, Claire. You're better than that. No, I'm just kidding. Her husband.
Benji hasn't had a decent brat. He's had like 6
Mike
months.
Is a man's man. Legit, bro. So, yeah. I remember I told him, man, if you come to Fight Club, we can just shoot bows up here. And he goes to a closer Fight Club to his house. I'm not mad at you, Mike, but my Fight Club has an indoor archery range.
There you go. Is that on the second floor of T77?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes. So, that's going
Benji,
on.
you want some brats?
What about some Chick-fil-A? Because Adam and Martin brought it back from TC today, boys, and it's going to be upstairs when we get up there.
Is it for real?
Yeah, that's brothers right there.
I'm so happy.
That was the real
I
pastor
had no
stuff I was talking
idea
about.
that Chick-fil-A was happening upstairs.
No free shout-outs, Chick-fil-A. Go vote for Gabby Vermilia on John's Facebook post.
You got to do it. Absolutely.
She's earned it.
She's earned it. Employee of the Year. That's
Absolutely.
what we're going for.
Love it. Tab, don't forget, like, subscribe, share these podcasts with anybody. Make sure you're continuing to dig in. And we love you guys. We're pumped about what God's doing in your life. Keep saying yes, and let's get after it. This is John, Benji, and Britton signing.